I think John and Ron are really great storytellers. They understood the essence of a great Disney animated movie.
I sensed a marriage that had to be formed between our process and their process. I'm Alan Menken. I'm the composer of the music for Little Mermaid.
The melding of our strengths, I think, gave kind of a stronger thing than either one of us could have done individually. In January of 1985, we had the first of what was called a gong show. This was a concept that Michael Eisner brought over to Disney from Paramount.
It was an opportunity for all of us to get together and to sort of open the doors up and hear everything and anything.
Everyone was supposed to come up with 5 new ideas for animated features. And I went out and looked for ideas, and I went into a bookstore and I read The Little Mermaid and got very excited about it and wondered why it had never been done before, and then realized when I got to the end that it was a very sad story where the mermaid dies at the end and loses her prince. But I came up with an idea of a way to make it end in a happier way, wrote up a 2-page treatment, and then when we reconvened 2 weeks later, I pitched The Little Mermaid. It actually got gonged.
It was gonged because they were in development at that point on a sequel to Splash, and they thought it would be too close, so they just said, nah, we're doing the sequel to Splash, forget it.
But the next day, I got a call from Jeffrey Katzenberg, who said he had read the treatment and actually thought it had potential and it was put in development.
It was outstanding, and it was better in the writing than it was in the telling. The question was, what do you do with it next? In the world in which I come from, go hire a great screenwriter.
So I guess he was checking out other writers, people were sending in drafts and everything, and Ron Clements finally came to him and said, I think we can do a good job on this.
John Musker and I, we had worked together quite a bit. We were both writers as well as storymen, so it seemed natural to ask him if he would want to collaborate on a script.
Ron and John really fought passionately for an opportunity to write it, and it, you know, as animators and as animation directors, it never occurred to me that they were screenwriters.
The idea of doing a fairy tale appealed to me because it was certainly part of the Disney tradition, but there hadn't been one in 30 years. So it was doing something in a tradition and yet trying to find a new approach to it that really hadn't been done before.
They wrote a stunning screenplay. I mean, just to this day, I remember it as being one of the best of anything I've ever had.
When I think of Ron and John, I think first of their sense of humor. And that's what permeates all of their movies. And it's a good-natured sense of humor.
My sense of humor is a little more low-key, maybe a little more self-deprecating. I'd say John has a more cutting sense of humor. He's edgier.
Ron and John are so quiet, you wouldn't think of them as being, you know, wild cartoon directors.
You think that everything you say is fine with them because they will think about it. They'll be just fine with it. And then they'll go off and do whatever they damn well want.
So while we were working on this script, we heard that Howard Ashman had actually been approached by the studio and was actually interested in working on The Little Mermaid.
David Geffen called me up one day and said, you must meet Howard Ashman.
Howard Ashman had been an off-Broadway director, book writer, and lyricist. So he was a bubbling under, I guess, Broadway talent.
Howard always knew he was going to be in theater, I think from the age of 10 on. After he moved to New York, he had a lot of jobs, did a lot of things. Nobody's an overnight success. He eventually wrote Little Shop of Horrors, and it was a tremendous success.
We were 2 people from Baltimore that somehow had made a living doing something that was not so easy to do when you start out here, and for celebrating a different kind of taste, or, you know, a different kind of beautiful villain, or a plant that ate you, or all things that seem very normal in Baltimore.
If you look at Howard Ashman's play, Little Shop of Horrors, it's very animation, very cartoony, very caricature. It's almost like a cartoon in live action.
I first met Howard because, like every other person in the world, I wanted to do a musical. So I called him up, and I thought he was a genius.
Howard gave me the best advice of anybody ever regarding directing this kind of movie. He said, Frank, this is supposed to be stupid. And it was the best advice. He said, my tongue was firmly in my cheek when I wrote this.
After Little Shop, Howard wrote a show called Smile that went on to Broadway, and that starred Jodie, and it was not a great success.
Because he wore so many creative hats, he had a lot of people that he had to answer to. And so I think that made it difficult.
His vision and Smile got compromised and compromised and compromised, whereas to the point that when it came out, it wasn't the play he wanted.
When Smile closed, he was looking for really all kinds of projects that had nothing to do with Broadway.
David Geffen had called Jeffrey Katzenberg and basically said, there's this brilliant talent named Howard Ashman, and you have to have him at the Walt Disney Company, so go get him.
Once I realized that Howard was the genie and had the answers, you know, I was unmerciful. I mean, I wasn't going to let that guy get away from us no matter what.
The escape to Burbank, to Hollywood, to film, to the West Coast, and to this form was absolutely essential to his inner being.
I grew up on Pinocchio and Peter Pan, and the idea of doing one of those is like there's all these library books on the shelf. There's Snow White, and there's Sleeping Beauty, and there's Cinderella, there's Peter Pan, there's Pinocchio. And to try to make something that fits comfortably on the shelf with those, I mean, that's like, what a difficult thing to do, but what a great thing to try to do.
I think Ron and John were very skeptical. I think they were very, I don't know. And yet when they met Howard, it all melted.
He was really enthusiastic about the project. To him, this was all new, and it was great. It was exciting, and that was exciting to us.
It was with great pleasure when I received a call from Howard about The Little Mermaid. It was an instant yes, primarily because I wanted to work with Howard again.
Alan is a genius at coming up with that melody, making that lyric work, putting the lyric together with that melody.
I had never written a score. I had written, you know, the incidental music in my own musicals, and Howard convinced me I should take that on.
And I remember very strongly that he was new. He was writing these songs, and it was not clear he could score the movie. And that's part of the journey. You start with people who are unsure and have great faith in them. You believe in them, and maybe they'll make magic.
So it was this collaboration between them, two talented people but with no experience in film or animation, and the young, gifted people at the Disney studio who were looking for something fresh and exciting to do, that created lightning. Lightning struck.